Hello there, my lovelies. How's it going? Welcome to my channel, Boomy Reactions. For those of you who are new, my name's Boomy, and thank you for watching. Now today, guys, I have another foodie video to spoil all of you foodies out there, like me. We're gluttons, aren't we? I feel like I'm doing an awful lot of food videos this week, which is never a bad thing. However, I do feel it's been far too long since I've looked at Max Miller's very handsome face and watched one of his tasting history videos. So here we are. Today we're going to be watching a video from Max Miller, and this one's been requested by one of my lovely patrons. This is from Rebecca Anayanami. Thank you so much, my lovelies. So today's video is a Depression era water pie. Interesting. I've never heard of a water pie. Doesn't really conjure up, you know, a good image, does it? A water pie. Now there is a picture there in the thumbnail. I'm sure you guys have spotted it already. It looks like there's almost like not a layer of custard on the top there, but maybe there's like a custard element of it. Maybe the water pie refers to steam that cooks the filling. Maybe it's a bit like custard based, or it could be, the name reminds me of a water crust pastry, which is, we know, the pastry that a pork pie is made of. So maybe it refers to the pastry. I have no idea. I'm grasping at this point because I don't know what this is. The Depression era, yes, hard times. Many families just couldn't afford an awful lot of food. You had to make do with whatever you could get hold of, and it had to be cheap. It had to be in an abundance. So very, very cheap. Vegetables, rationing as well, and using all parts of animals in terms of meat. So basically using as much as you could and really stretching meals out, you know, very, very difficult. Even now and it's nowhere near as bad as it was during the Depression era. Oh gosh, no. But even now, with the cost of living soaring in an awful lot of countries, I know in the US as well as here as well, it's becoming difficult again for a lot of families to budget and to get the groceries, and food is getting more and more expensive. Yes, it's a nightmare. So we all know once the cost of living goes up, food's going to go up, and it's just, you're going to have to get your budgeting cap on, aren't you? You're going to have to just make meals stretch a little bit further, get the most out of them. So this, I imagine, is an example of one of those dishes. So a water pie. Max, tell me what a water pie is. I can't wait. I haven't seen one of his videos in ages, and I miss spotting what Pokemon he's got in his kitchen. Let's have a look. Oh, we've got Lapras. Oh, and we've got Vaporeon and a jug there. I love that Max Miller just so open with his love for Pokemon. I love it too. Guys, let's get on with the video. I've already done an awful lot of talking. Again, I'm a chatterer. And if you're enjoying these reactions and mindless chatter, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you so much, my lovelies. If you're interested, I have a Buy Me Coffee account. That link is over here. And if you would like to help support my channel any further, I have a Patreon account. And if you want to check that out at all, that link is in the description just below there. Right, let's have a look at water pie.
A few years ago, there was a trend online of people making water pie from the Great Depression. And so I decided that I wanted to try it, but when I went to look for the original recipe from the period, I couldn't find one. I did find some, but they were not from the Great Depression. So today I'm going to be making a water pie from 1908 and looking at the actual origin of this interesting dessert.
Now I'm thinking, just based on a few of those thumbnail images there, maybe it looked like they were melting butter in water. Maybe it's actually a reference to the filling. Maybe it is actually water that goes into the filling of the pie.
So thank you to Our Place for sponsoring this video as I try my hand at water pie, this time on tasting history.
Fabulous book.
So the story that you'll see online is that water pie was invented during the Great Depression out of necessity. But if that was the case, you would think that there would be a recipe that had been printed in one of the many, many newspapers that was around at the time. They were printing pretty much every recipe that existed back then.
Or one of the housewives' cookbooks, or were they a little bit earlier? No, there was still some published around this kind of time era. Is that right? You'd think there would be a reference to it at least, even if there wasn't, you know, lots of different versions of a recipe.
But I couldn't find one.
That's so
All that I
strange.
could find when I searched were modern interpretations of what seems to be a dessert from a bygone era.
Oh, very much like how the variations on gumbo get around. It's like someone's interpretation of hearing somebody talk about it.
Now, that's not to say that the dessert did not exist at the time. It most surely did, because in 1982, a woman named Dolores Stone wrote in a newspaper asking people if they had a recipe for this pie that she remembers her grandmother making during the Depression. Last call for water pie recipe. Dolores Stone writes, back in 1936 in Cordell, Oklahoma, my grandmother made something called water pie for her 10 kids. It was made with sugar, water, and spices in a pie shell. I would love to hear from anyone who might know about this recipe. Now,
Maybe the filling is just like, I can't even imagine what the filling would be like. So it's water, sugar, spices, obviously. And that's it. Maybe thickened with like flour. Something.
Now, maybe someone reached out to Dolores with a recipe, and I sure hope for her sake that they did, because I looked through many cookbooks from this period and couldn't find anything called water pie. But that's not terribly surprising because, frankly, if you could afford a cookbook, then you could afford to make a regular custard pie, which this is a version of. But I was surprised that it also didn't exist in any of the tens of thousands of newspapers that I have access to through multiple online archives.
And considering that, you know, there's going to be, there were, you know, over the last however many years, there would have been people that had fond memories of having a water pie made for them by their grandparents or their parents. So it's bizarre that there's no recipe to be found.
It wasn't anywhere, so I was beginning to think that this is one of those recipes that just never left the kitchen recipe box. But just as I began to think that I was going to have to give up my quest to find a historic recipe, I came across a blog called History Reheated, where the author had the same dilemma that I was having, but she had it about a year ago. And she did find 2 recipes for water pie, but they were not from the Great Depression. In fact, they were from before the Great Depression, so that immediately debunks the idea that it was invented during the Depression.
Do you know, I still think that somewhere in someone's attic, in their grandmother's belongings or their family's belongings, there is a cookbook somewhere with a handwritten recipe for a water pie. There's got to be.
One recipe came in 1908 and another came in the 1880s, quite a bit before the Depression. And I'll be using bits of both to remake this pie, but I'm going to mostly be using the 1908 recipe, which comes from the Fulton Gazette in Fulton, Missouri. And it was sent in by a Mrs. Hollis Cruz as a submission to the newspaper's cooking contest and says, water pie, 1 cup sugar, 2 tablespoons of flour mixed well with sugar, then add 1/2 cup of hot water, lump of butter, and flavoring. Cook until it becomes thick, then pour into your prepared paste and bake slowly. So most of the ingredients are the same as what you'll usually find online, the modern interpretation, but what's different is that this recipe has you mix the ingredients and then cook them before putting them into the pie shell. The other modern interpretation usually has you just kind of add everything into the pie shell and then put butter on the top. And I guess it works as well, but that is kind of the major difference. Now, this is really supposed to be like a custard pie, and I know that because in an 1886 recipe, it says this is a good substitute for custard pie when milk is scarce. And so, just like I would with most custard pies, I'm going to blind bake the crust so it doesn't end up all soggy and gross at the end.
Or, as we like to say in the UK, so it doesn't have a soggy bottom.
As far as the pastry that I'm going to do, I am going to use a recipe from Fannie Farmer's Boston Cooking School cookbook, which was extremely popular in 1908, and she has several recipes for pastry. Most of them have either butter or lard or shortening. I'm going to do one that has butter and lard. Specifically, 1/4 cup or 55 grams of lard or shortening,
Flaky.
and 1/4 cup or 55 grams of butter. Then 1½ cups or 180 grams of flour, a half teaspoon of salt, and some ice cold water. And the process to make this is slightly different than most pie crusts that I've ever made. It has you whisk together the flour and the salt, and then cut the lard into the flour with a knife or your fingertips, and then you add just a little bit of cold ice water, enough to make it come together into a dough. Took me about 3 tablespoons. And then put that dough onto a floured surface and knead it just a couple of times to bring it together, and then flatten it out, and then put the butter, which should be cold, on top of the dough and fold it over and give it a few rolls with a rolling pin.
So we're going for a rough puff kind of pie texture. I don't think that's that similar to a pie crust. I've not been making pie crusts, US, American style pie crusts, for very long, so you'll have to excuse me if that's totally wrong. But that's very similar to the Kent Rawlins recipe that I followed to make a pie crust for a sweet potato pie and a pumpkin pie. I like the recipe, so I use it a lot. On a pecan pie. But yeah, it looks similar. So you get that kind of nice lamination, but you want big chunks of butter, not big, you know what I mean? Still quite big chunks still in there, and it gives it this wonderfully flaky texture.
I guess it's kind of like a rough puff pastry,
right,
but
yeah.
not exactly. Fold it over a couple more times while rolling, and that is it.
Yeah.
There should still be pretty big chunks of butter left in the dough. And the recipe says it can be used straight away, or you can chill it, and I opted to chill mine in the refrigerator for 30 minutes before rolling it out and lining a pie dish with it, crimping the edges, and then poking some holes in the bottom, and then I lined it with aluminum foil, but you can use parchment as well, and fill it with baking beans. So you can blind bake it at 400.
What do you call them? Baking beans or beads? I call them baking beans.
125 degrees Fahrenheit, 220 Celsius for 15 minutes. Then take it out of the oven, remove the hot baking beans, and return it to the oven and bake for another 5 or 6 minutes, or until the bottom is pretty much done.
Nice crimping going on there, Max. That's exactly the way that I would make any of my pastry cases.
And then you want to let the crust cool completely before you make your filling, which will be made in a saucepan. And now let us make this pie filling, for which you will need 1 cup or 200 grams of sugar, 2 tablespoons of flour, 4 tablespoons or 55 grams of butter, 3/4 of a cup or 175 milliliters of warm water. This is a little bit more than the 1908 recipe calls for, and a little bit less than the 1880s recipe calls for, so I just kind of
somewhere in the middle.
met in the middle and hope that worked out. Also, the later recipe actually just says add flavoring, but it doesn't tell you what flavoring.
Ooh. Without any spoilers, what would I go for? Do you know, with it being a custard pie, it reminds me of an egg custard tart, which is my favourite. It is one of the few British puddings that we actually do quite well. It's one of my favourites. And there's lots of nutmeg in there. So I'm going to say nutmeg and vanilla. I like the combination of those.
The older recipe says it should be nutmeg, so I added that. I added a 1/4 teaspoon, but then I also added some vanilla, which was very popular in 1908.
Max, we think alike, don't we?
Added 1½ teaspoons of that. I don't think it's bad to add both. You could probably add something else, because I have a feeling this pie is going to be in desperate need of some flavor. So just mix the flour and the sugar together in a saucepan, and then add the butter and the water and the flavorings, and set it on the stove over a medium heat. After about a minute, the butter should melt and you can stir everything together, and then after a couple more minutes, it will begin to thicken up. This is all due to the sugar and the flour. The 1889 recipe actually also includes an egg, which would really make it more like a custard, but this recipe, no egg. Once your filling thickens, pour it directly into the cooled pie crust, and since my crust was much deeper than expected, I decided to make another batch of filling and add that in as well.
Well, if it's tasty, it's not a bad thing. Okay, I know it's only made with water, it's not made with milk and there's no cream, but it does look kind of custardy, doesn't it?
Especially since a lot of the liquid will evaporate off. But if you are using a pre-made pie crust that's kind of already in one of those little tins, 1 batch of filling should do. Then put the pie in the oven at 425 degrees Fahrenheit, 220 Celsius for 15 minutes. then drop the temperature to 350 degrees Fahrenheit, 175 Celsius, and bake for another 45 minutes. Honestly, I do not know if that's enough because unlike a traditional custard with milk and eggs, which will set in the oven as it cooks, this remains liquidy, pretty much the same as it was when it went in, and it doesn't set until it cools.
Yeah, so with custard pie, I can only speak on behalf of egg custards that we make it here in the UK, British egg custard. The bake is a bit longer than you think it would be, but I'd imagine if you haven't got the egg in here as well, it's going to be even longer again because you've got more liquid that needs to evaporate off, like Max said.
So how you know it's done? It's kind of a mystery.
Give it a wobble.
So hopefully that works. But after about an hour total, you can take it out and let it cool completely.
Okay.
It really does take about a half a day to cool. It does need to cool completely to firm up, but that gives us plenty of time to go back and look at some of the origins of water pie.
Yeah. Looked quite
So since these
there,
water pie recipes come from decades before the Great Depression, it is obvious that this pie was not invented during the Depression as a result of the hard times people were facing in the 1930s. But that doesn't mean that it didn't come from hard times. In fact, the Florida Agriculturalist in 1889 makes it very clear that that is precisely why this pie exists. The 1880s had this recipe kind of bouncing all over newspapers for about a decade, and in 1889 it is couched in kind of a conversation between two women who were trying to figure out ways to economically feed their family. Yeah. "I skip all your recipes which call for cream and over 3 eggs, said our economical friend the other day as we seated ourselves in her cheery sitting room for a morning call. In the first place, downright cream is not to be had in these parts, and a pudding or pie with more than 3 eggs for an ordinary family is a sin." Oh. And she shook her head with such an air of positiveness that was meant to be convincing at least. "I have one here," said I am sure you will like. You see, it speaks for itself as economy. Cold water pie. 2 tablespoons of flour, level. 2 tablespoons of sugar, heaping. 1 egg, a small tablespoon of melted butter, nutmeg, and a good half pint of water. That will make 1 pie. "That sounds somewhat like it," she said, "and good, too. I used to make just such pies and custards when I first came to Florida over 20 years ago. It was almost before the days of condensed milk. At least it was very high in price. And as to getting a pint of milk from these fractious Florida cows was to pay pretty dearly for it. Oh, we did have a hard time the first year or two." Oh. See, while the stock market crash of 1929 and the subsequent Great Depression are what often comes to mind when we think of hard times in America, the country had actually had a series of smaller depressions in the decades leading up to it, including one called the Long Depression, which started with the Panic of 1873 following a post-Civil War speculative bubble, and that lasted until 1879, or by many accounts, 1899, since during those last 20 years, they had a recession just about every year to 18 months.
Oh my gosh. Admittedly, when I hear depression, the Great Depression, I think of the Great Depression. I don't think, I wasn't aware that anything came before it. Oh.
Was, after all, the Gilded Age, when a few uber-rich people at the top were doing just fine, and then everyone else was forced to make things like water pie.
Yeah, the other 99%
Another
of the
economic collapse took place just as the 1908 recipe was being printed, because that followed the Panic of 1907, when there was a run on the Knickerbocker Trust Company, and that led to the creation of the Federal Reserve System, but not before making life considerably harder for the majority of people in the country. Now, all of these paled in comparison with what would take place in the 1930s during the Great Depression, but people were having hard times long before that happened. Yeah. So my question is, if people couldn't afford the ingredients to make a proper pie, then why did they feel the need to make a pie at all? I mean, I like pie, but I wouldn't call it essential, really, at least not today. But it turns out that around the turn of the 20th century, pie and other baked goods were rather essential for many people.
Yeah, I think something similar over here in the UK post-war, during World Wars maybe as well. Desserts, puddings after dinner were a common thing for most households and most families because meat and meals were going to be stretched as they were anyway. So if you could design something sweet after, your meager portions of meat and vegetables and potatoes, very small, then it would fill your tummy, wouldn't it? It's stodge, it's carb, it's heavy, it's gonna line your stomach, and you're gonna go to bed at least with a smile on your face because your tummy's gonna be feeling a little bit more full. So I understand it, I get it.
In 1907, it was written that in no other country or at any other time has the demand for good baked stuffs been so great as it is at the present time in this country. The time has now come, whether it be in the home of the humblest workman or in the mansion of the rich, the cook or housewife is more praised and esteemed for her good bread, biscuits, pastries, and cakes than for anything else. See, unlike today, where pie is typically seen as an occasional treat, pies during the turn of the 20th century were often a staple of many Americans' diet.
I don't know about anyone else, but having a sweet tooth and coming from a family that did have something sweet after, your dinner time meal, your evening meal, I still carry that tradition on. It's just not, my evening meal is not rounded off without something sweet. How many other people feel the same? I think it's like passed on from generations.
In 1899, the city of New York consumed 80 million full-sized pies a year, over 23 pies per person. And that doesn't count homemade pies, but just the manufactured pies that came from the 21 pie-making factories that surrounded the city.
Who doesn't love pie?
Time, pie was on the level of steel and railroads. There was the Steel Trust and the Railroad Trust, and there was a burgeoning Pie Trust. A monopoly where one company, the American Pastry and Manufacturing Company, owned 19 of those pie-making factories that surrounded the city.
Wow.
Pies were held in such high esteem that there were articles condemning this pie trust, which threatened the diversity of this most important dish.
Well, if you think about it, pie, you can cut it up into lots of smaller pieces. One pie can feed a very big family.
The pie is an article of necessity in every household, as much so as the bed or the cooking stove.
Absolutely.
Other dishes have come and gone to suit the fickle whims of the public, but pie remains. It is hallowed by maternal associations and family memories. Its virtues have been celebrated by our best essayists and sung by our great poets. A trust in pie should be as abhorrent to the American people as a trust in family Bibles or family trees. The monopolists must keep their greedy hands off that good familiar creature.
There's nothing more American than an apple pie. Or pie. Pie in general. I get it. I understand the love for pie.
Makes you feel downright patriotic. But it turns out that even back then, pie had its detractors, and partly this was because it was associated with the working class.
There were pie haters. I can't believe it. Who would hate pie? Who? It'd have to be a strange sort of person to not like pie.
And it turns out that there were a bunch of pie snobs out there, like Rudyard Kipling, author of The Jungle Book. Surely he was influenced by the fact that in the UK, pies were also typically a food of the common people at this time.
Yes, yeah.
And so, when living in New England, he wrote that I live within the Great Pie Belt. It extends through the New England states and through northern New York. Pie is a habit all over the eastern states. In the West, it is a debauch. Have you ever considered the moral and physical condition of a people which eats pie for breakfast, pie for dinner, pie for supper? Snob and a half.
Right.
It was not only the foreigners who were condemning our American pie-eating habits, but also domestic authors. In 1902...
British. I am surprised by this. Yeah, I am, because, most British people, we love our pies. And most of our desserts, well, they're not, a lot of them are pastries or tarts, but I'd say they're akin to a pie.
A New York Times columnist, Kate Masterson, took the country to task in her article, The Great American Pie. Pie really is an American evil. It is not only notoriously unhealthy, but it lacks all those subtle distinctions which should mark all foods, especially the dessert.
You can make a pie healthier maybe not healthier, but the purpose of them is if it is to round off your evening meal and to make sure that everyone is at least feeling full. What's evil about that?
Persons fond of pie have a way of classing it as a diet rather than a dessert. Pie, however, cannot be taken seriously as a food. Of course, no dessert should be serious, for that matter, but it ought to be palatable, piquant, delicate, and possessed of the psychic suggestion which is part of all properly composed dishes.
This is hoity-toity, isn't it? This is dessert, pudding, whatever you want to refer to it as. It needs to be sweet, it needs to be satisfying, should probably be a little bit stodgy. You know, want a little bit of weight there. Piquant, delicate, like petit four delicate. Oh my gosh, you're gonna eat it. It's a dessert. It's not like this weird criteria that it has to meet. It has to taste good. It has to be satisfying. Chocolate, yeah, makes it better.
She goes on to say that pie is immoral and puts it in a category with cigar smoke, paint, and turpentine. She says those that eat pie frequently are dyspeptic, and they gorge themselves at the cafeterias and pie bakeries of America. Pie eaters at a lunch counter are as hysterical and unmannerly as women at a bargain sale. They mass themselves and wedge solidly toward their magnet. The effects of pie are, like those of every other injurious food, insidious.
Biggest
no
pie
great man was
ever.
ever fond of pie. No important work was ever consummated on a pie diet. Pie is a clog on the spirit and a ball and chain on the imagination.
This is the most hysterical pie hatred I've ever heard in my life. What's her problem? Did somebody throw a cream pie at her when she was a child or something? This woman has a deeply psychological relationship with confectionery and pie. Get over it.
Wow, this lady really, really hates pie. Or at least that's what I thought at first, but it turns out that Kate Masterson, in addition to being a wonderful journalist, of which there were few female journalists at the period, she was also a satirist. And so she is actually not making fun of the pie eaters here. She is making fun
of the pie snobs.
The people, the snobs, who look down on the pie eaters, because there were all these other articles, a little less hyperbolic, that were talking about poor people eating pie.
Well, that's okay then, because it's satirical. I'll let her off.
They also often said that pie was just unhealthy because the amount of lard that was always put into the crust, and, you know, maybe they have a point. But unhealthy or not, I love a good piece of pie.
Me
so
too.
My only question is, am I about to have a good piece of pie or not?
Well, based on what we've just heard, it might also question your morality.
And here we are, water pie from 1908. I am actually quite shocked at how firmed up this is, considering that it's mostly water and sugar, you know. It is not the prettiest thing I've ever seen.
No.
The butter has like congealed on top. So that's what it is. But let's give it a taste.
Yeah. Got a bit of a jiggle to it. Oh.
Actually pretty good.
Oh, got the eyebrow there. The eyebrow lip.
It's actually really good. I'll have more.
Hey. Delicious, actually.
So you get a little, that nutmeg and the vanilla. That's the flavors. There's nothing else there, except for sugar, really. So I think whatever flavoring you add is very, very important with
That's
this.
the stuff.
You know, you could add maybe lemon, kind of make a lemon meringue flavor, key lime or something like that, or another spice. I don't know. You could do a lot of different flavors with it, but that's what it is. It's a really great vessel for whatever flavor. I think the butter is very important. It does give it a richness. It's firm without being super firm. It's kind of like a custard, but a little bit softer. Yeah. I think if it was cold, it would be even firmer.
I love the music in the background.
That's really good. So as the water kind of evaporated, it left like a caramel ring around the pie crust. And the crust itself is really, really good. Super, super flaky, super buttery. Yeah, I'm actually really surprised at how much I like this pie. Thanksgiving is just around the corner. So if you don't want to do your normal like pecan pie or pecan pumpkin pie,
never.
This would be a cool alternative. Actually, that's kind of the texture. Is the texture of the filling reminds me of the filling of a pecan pie.
Really?
So if you like that texture, kind of gloopy,
yes,
but semi-firm, you like this pie. So maybe it doesn't come from the Great Depression, but it surely was popular during the Great Depression, I have no doubt. And maybe it can be popular again because it's pretty darn good, it's pretty darn easy, and yeah, you should make it. So enjoy your water pie, and I will see you next time on Tasting History.
Next time. I'm just gonna let the credits run because I really like this music. Love it. Okay. Well, Max said it was delicious. I would be interested in making a water pie. If it's comparable to a pecan pie, I have absolutely no complaints. I would happily try it because I have recently discovered, guys, that I'm a huge fan of pecan pie. And I love custard pies, although over here we'd probably describe them as a custard tart, but similar thing, akin to a pie. On the pie charter, part of the pie family. Rebecca, have you ever tried to make a water pie? How did that go? I wonder, rose water, would that, I really, really like the flavour of rose water or orange blossom. Would that be a little bit of a weak flavour to go in there, do you think? You could do anything with it, couldn't you? You could really, you could jazz it up with any flavour that you like. Although I don't think chocolate would work. Do you not think? Well, I am actually pleasantly surprised by how that came out. I mean, your main ingredient is sugar. It's always going to taste good. But texturally, I don't know, I was a bit undecided about it. But Max said it's great. What do you think, guys? Have any of you ever made one of these pies, water pies? Let me know in the comments. What did it come out like? Well, thank you very much for requesting this video, Rebecca and Ianami. Another banger. I get very sad when I haven't seen Max's handsome face for a while. So thank you very much. And we got to see some Pokemon as well in the background. Take care of yourselves, my lovelies, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.